Hello and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily. I'm Dr. Russell Sharp, your host, and this is your podcast for everything soilless cultivation. However, we're looking at soil today, specifically answering the question that often gets asked when we talk to customers about our hydroponic fertilizer, and that is, can you use hydroponic fertilizers when you're growing plants in soil? So specifically, plants that are growing in the ground, in your garden or on a farm, but also plants that are growing in containers, plant pots where people have put soil or loam-based grow media. So loam is another word for mineral soil, as opposed to non-soil based grow medias, which we normally think of as being hydroponics. So can those hydroponic fertilizers be used in soil, either in the ground or in pots? So we'll go into the potential pitfalls and potential benefits of using hydroponic fertilizers in that situation on today's episode. So the short answer is yes, but the actual how we can get to that situation has some nuances, and it's not yes in every situation. So a hydroponic fertilizer contains all the nutrients that the plant needs. Now, in hydroponics, most people use an A and a B fertilizer because they don't want the ingredients to react. Whereas in gold leaf, as it's called in the US, or liquid gold in the UK, our hydroponic fertilizer is a unique one-part fertilizer that contains all the nutrients without them reacting. Now, that's very different to a garden fertilizer or a farm fertilizer, which normally is just NPK plus 1 or 2 micronutrients. They don't need every single essential nutrient. That's why they are cheaper, and that's why they're a one part normally. So, yeah, if you were to, let's look at it this way. You couldn't use a garden fertilizer in hydroponics because you'd get a nutrient deficiency. And those fertilizers, you don't get nutrient deficiency when you're growing in soil because they're relying on the soil to provide some of those macro and micronutrients. However, if you apply a hydroponic fertilizer into soil, yes, you can use it, and you are not relying on the soil for any of the nutrients. So the plant might absorb nutrition from the soil that was already there, and in addition to the nutrients you use. So yes, you can use a hydroponic fertilizer. You might not need to use a hydroponic fertilizer though, and it might be too expensive to do that. But in certain situations, you might think that it's the best situation. And I don't know if you can hear that. That's the rain against the window. It's really coming down here. We've got a storm in the UK at the moment. So you can use hydroponic fertilizer. It's not always essential, but it's not going to do any harm specifically. There is nothing in a standard garden fertilizer that makes it suitable for garden soil or for farm soil. It's just that they're cheaper because they don't require it. There's nothing specifically formulated that makes it stand out and works really well in synergy with the soil particles and mineral nutrition. Two important points to consider are that hydroponic fertilizers are designed to be applied every time the plant gets irrigated in a hydroponic system. You don't do just water and then hydroponic nutrients once a week, for example. Whereas in a garden or a farm, you may fertilize the soil once a week with a fertilizer, once a fortnight, or even once a year in a farm-based system. So the instructions on the hydroponic fertilizer will not apply in that situation in all cases. So you may need to quadruple the concentration you apply if you're only applying that hydroponic fertilizer once a week. So consider that. Don't say this is one time where you can actually apply more fertilizer than it states on the bottle of the hydroponic fertilizer. For gold leaf, or liquid gold as it's called in the UK, we have full instructions for soil application. So you just need to consult them. Don't guess when it comes to that, because it's always better to apply less than it is more when it comes to our fertilizers. And the other thing to consider is if you're looking to get that extra yield bump from dechlorination. If you're applying once a week or once a fortnight, you're not going to get that bump from dechlorination if you're irrigating or watering your plants with tap water in the time in between. So you could use a dechlorinator. In the UK, we recommend Dr. Hydro Dechlorinator, or if you're using liquid gold already, then email me next time that you order a bottle, and we will provide you with a free sample that will do more than enough water for those times in between you're using the liquid gold. So liquid gold and gold leaf, it dechlorinates instantly, and it's inbuilt technology, so you don't need to worry about dechlorination. If you're using a standard A and B, then you're not getting that dechlorination technology anyway, whether it's the time you're fertilizing or the time you're just irrigating with water. I always recommend dechlorination because it is a significant yield bump you can get from just applying a very, very few small drops to your tank or your watering can or your sprayer or anything like that. So definitely recommend it. Potential pitfalls can also include overdosing if you're not careful. If you apply hydroponics fertilizer every single time you water, you might get a build-up and you might leach pollution into the waterways in the water system, and that's not cool. So don't be applying hydroponic fertilizers every time you water your plants unless you really know what you're doing and it's a low level. If you're using a standard fertilizer that's not liquid gold, then you could disrupt soil pH as well. So the sweet spot, pH 5.5 to 6.5, many soils are higher than that or lower than that. If you're using a hydroponic fertilizer, then that won't correct the pH. A standard A and B fertilizer won't correct the pH. Gold leaf, or liquid gold as it's called in the UK, that will correct the soil pH. That's really good. And then the tap water as well. If you've got really alkaline water, then that might be an issue as well. So there's certain situations where using hydroponic fertilizers make really good sense. If you're using loam-based grown media in containers, hanging baskets, things like this, seedlings, propagation trays, really high value, high density situations where you might be using soil or loam-based fertilizers, loam-based grow medias, definitely I'd use a hydroponic fertilizer there rather than a cheap and cheerful Miracle Grow, Phosphagen, Tomarite type products, or plants that have got a need for lots of calcium. So if you're growing tomatoes in the ground, I wouldn't use Tomarite because it doesn't contain calcium, and you could have issues such as blossom end rot as a result. So I would use a hydroponic fertilizer, and obviously I would use one of ours. So for that, but you can use anyone else's A and B fertilizer for growing tomatoes, peppers, tomatoes, even potatoes, and like this, anything that loves a lot of calcium. You could get nutrient burn if you apply too much. Remember, hydroponic fertilizers always contain a lot of potassium, and especially the additives as well. So you're doubling up on additives as well. If your soil has already got good levels of potassium, that's a potential issue. And what else do we consider? We talked about environmental considerations. We talked about pH. Well, what else could we think about? Maybe if you were growing on a green roof, you had a living roof, and you were seeing poor growth, you could use a hydroponic fertilizer. So on a green roof or a living roof, there's not much soil there. Then there's a small amount. It might be sand-based to allow quick drainage. So in that situation, you might get poor establishment, and you really do want to have good establishment so that the grow media binds together, doesn't get washed or blown away. And so that would be a really good situation where you could use a hydroponic fertilizer. So that's been a whistle-stop tour of whether you can use hydroponic fertilizers in soil. It's something we get asked a lot about, and we recommend, yes, you can. Obviously, you don't want to be applying fertilizer every time you irrigate. So I would only apply once every week or every fortnight, and only during the growing season. Don't apply fertilizer after September in the UK. And then all the way through to March, really, I wouldn't bother applying any fertilizer. It's only going to it's going to waste money, and it's going to lead to nitrite accumulation, things like this, nasty things like this. So, but during the growing season, applying hydroponic fertilizers is a really good idea. And then in between the fertilizer, you might want to use a dechlorinator as well when you're just watering your plants, just to get that extra yield bump. And so you can use an A and a B. Just be careful with pH correction and things like that in very alkaline or acidic soils. They won't correct those issues, but something like liquid gold leaf would. So it's a very common issue we get asked a lot about. In the US, we often get asked to release our pH perfect and dechlorinator technology on its own without the nutrition. Because of this issue, because so many people do only fertilize their plants once a week when they're grown in soil, it's something we looked at. It's something we may consider in the near future as well. So if you're interested in that, a product that just corrects pH and dechlorinates, then let me know, and I can put that through to the people in charge of actually delivering that in the US or North America in general. So that's been Hydroponics Daily for today. If you've got any questions, let me know. Speak to us at Utrema. You'll find any of the emails will come to me eventually. If you want to spell Utrema, it's Latin for wasabi. And we're a British-based company, and we make unique specialist fertilizers and inputs. So if you've got any questions about any of those products as well, or anything about growing in general, then get in contact. Thank you very much for listening. Until tomorrow, goodbye.